Testing, testing. Lovely. Okay.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, welcome to another Wildlife Trust Members Day. Thank you so much for coming along today, particularly if you've had to brave an apocalypse to get here. My name is James, and I am your MC for the day. I can only apologize for my evil twin brother down in the canteen with his deafening voice. I'm sorry about that. So just before I hand over to our chairman, William Stevens, I just need to go through a few housekeeping notes. So listen carefully, ready for the exam. First of all, fire procedure. There is no scheduled fire drill today. So if you hear a fire alarm, please leave the auditorium through your nearest exit, and then the fire assembly point is out there, down along that way, and on the tennis stroke basketball courts, but there will be fire marshals to guide you. You should all, I think, have had the opportunity to pick up a program and an agenda for the day, and I think everyone has been emailed a members pack in advance, which includes exciting things like the minutes of last year's AGM. Toilets are out of the main door, and we've got some toilets just there on the right. We've also got some toilets down by the canteen. I know the ladies down there has flooded, and I'm not sure whether we've sorted that out yet. So perhaps, ladies, best to go for the ones out here for now. If anyone hasn't yet found the canteen area, it is just along the corridor down there. There are some steps down to it. So if anyone is not comfortable with using the steps, just find a member of staff and they will show you the alternative route. This is a no smoking site, which includes e-cigarettes, so please avoid using those. We've got lots of first aiders with us today. You'll be able to recognize them from the green cross badges that they are wearing. So if you feel ill or unwell at any time, just find someone with a green cross badge. We've also got a first aid station just out there where you registered, and there will be first aiders on all of the guided walks this afternoon, so you will be well looked after. We have our official photographer, Holly, with us today. She will be taking photographs throughout the day, which are vital for us in order to be able to tell people about the sorts of things that we get up to. If you are not comfortable with being photographed, that's absolutely fine. If you haven't yet got we're issuing little red dots for people who don't want to be photographed so that Holly knows not to photograph you. So if you haven't got one of those yet, you can get one from the reception out there. We're going to have some talks now. There will be a break at 11:30 for refreshments and a lunch break at 1 o'clock. And after that, we'll go on guided walks. All I would say now is if, just before those breaks, if you can just wait in here, because there are sort of quasi-military instructions to make sure that we run to time. So I just need to go through those with you. So please don't run off at the end of the talks. The final thing I need to say is, could you just please make sure that your mobile phones are on silent? Thank you very much. I think that's everything. Laurie, have I missed anything? Fabulous. Got over the first hurdle. Well, in that case, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our chairman, William Stevens. Thank you very much.
I'll take the applause, although I know it was for James. Hello, I'm William Stevens. I'm still chair of the Wildlife Trust for Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire, but not for much longer. So thank you very much indeed. I've been chairing for 4 years and a trustee for about 10. A warm welcome to everybody here, and also people who are online. I should point at the camera at the back. So I hope that everybody can hear and can enjoy the day. Once again, we look for big venues. The number of people coming to the AGMs is increasing. So unfortunately, some people wanted to come to the AGM but were unable to, so are having to look online. So thank you very much for your perseverance. Book early to avoid disappointment. Today we've got presentations from our Young People's Forum. which stars of the show last year and coming back to tell us what they've been doing. And then Brian Eversham, our CEO, is going to talk to us about Strawberry Hill. And the good news coming from Strawberry Hill, I'll leave to him to say. We always value feedback, and we got quite a lot of feedback last AGM, which was there wasn't enough time for coffee or for lunch. And so we've tried to move so that there is more time for coffee, because it's quite a long way, this venue. So more time for coffee and more time for lunch before you go off on your activities. So we'll try to keep to that agenda. So with that, I should stop. Have a great day, enjoy the activities, and I'm sure the rain is going to hold off. I'll now hand over to the Young People's Forum for your talk.
Hi, welcome to our talk. So we are the Young People's Forum, and this is our 2024 update. So coming up, we're going to talk about who we are, past and present projects, what's next, and what we would like from you, the audience, today. So we are a group of 11 to 24-year-olds who are all interested and passionate about wildlife conservation in our 3 counties. We were set up in 2022 to help the Trust work better for young people, and we have worked together on many projects so far. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about what these projects are and what we're planning and working on in the future. Thank you.
So one of the projects that I've personally been involved in is a documentary about chalk streams. These are very rare habitats, and as some of you may know, there are only 250 of them in the world, and 80% are in the UK. But I'm afraid they're not all in very good condition, and suffering from pollution from sewage and diffuse agricultural runoff, as well as over-abstraction. So I'm making a documentary to try and highlight some of these issues by including comparisons with healthy chalk streams and ones that are more polluted, so the public can see that maybe their local chalk stream is not quite as healthy as they thought it was, because we know how important it is to raise public awareness about issues like this, so maybe stuff can be done about it.
Hi, I'm Alex. The Young People's Forum have made a lot of progress this year, helping to protect wild spaces and wildlife. It is an honour to be a member of the forum. All the members and the leaders, Alison and Laura, are so inspirational. During the year, I have been quite busy doing things like writing some blogs about the Peatland Bog project, spiders and litter picking, which I try to do when I can. I have been involved with the making of some videos and have helped with writing some articles and with the takeover of the local wildlife magazine this year too. Doing some research, finding interesting facts about many things, including butterflies and winter insects. A highlight this year was the opportunity to be involved with the Camborne Open Gardens over the summer. It was great to help out and interesting to see all the displays, and seeing other Wildlife Trust employees again, people like Becca and Ian, who have been nice and helpful to me in the past, was brilliant. I was also the first member of the Young People's Forum to go to a trustee meeting on the 1st of October. I found the meeting really interesting, as was the youth walk, which I'll talk about shortly. Having another operation on my legs this year was frustrating, but also reminded me of the health benefits of even just sitting when you can't walk out in wild spaces.
Hi. So Eloise unfortunately could not make it today, so I'm covering for her. So Eloise is 17 years old, and she's taking environmental science, biology, and politics at A-level. And she says that she's fascinated by nature, the growing sustainability industry, and political discourse surrounding the global climate crises and conservation. She joined this group because she thinks it creates a a safe community for important conversations about the natural world, and also an opportunity to have a closer connection to the Wildlife Trust and the work it does. It also allows young people to meet and connect with others who hold the same concerns for the environment. Thank you, Eloise.
Shall I read it from now? Right, thanks. Hello. I'm currently studying horticulture at CRC. My loves are for growing vegetables in my veg truck at home, apple picking, looking at the sunsets, and going for walks around our area of Cambridgeshire. I'm very passionate about getting people to enjoy nature through hands-on activities, and I like building hedgehog houses and things like that. I really enjoyed an ecology workshop I went to with Brian in the summer, and we did some butterfly sweeping and a lot of learning in, I believe it was Ramsey, or near Ramsey. So that was good. And I really enjoyed being part of the Young People's Forum over the last 3 or 4 years. And I love campaigning for making about stopping litter, fly tipping, single-use plastics in the vapes, and generally, and stopping the North Sea oil drilling. Thanks.
So, hello. My name's Ethan, and I'm 17 years old. So I'm at that kind of age now where I'm making decisions which will influence the rest of my life, so careers, universities, all that sort of thing. I'm very fortunate that I know that my passion for nature will guide me for the rest of my life. And that is why I'm part of the Young People's Forum, to give other young people the opportunity to have the kind of very special connection that we all have. So off the back of that, as young people, social media, whether we like it or not, plays a very large part in our lives now. And that's why, personally, I've been very interested in advocating for the use of social media as a force for good in the conservation movement, so that we can start using modern tools to kind of help the environment instead of damage it. So yeah, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Lily Mai, and I'm also a 17-year-old sixth form student. And one day I'm going to be an environmental lawyer, hopefully, and I'm going to save the world. And I really like this environment, thank you, because I absolutely love the idea of the Young People's Forum and sharing a love and understanding of nature amongst young people. And it's really, really important for the vitality of our future world, because one day the world is going to be in our hands, in our children's hands, and it's really important that through the Young People's Forum we're able to connect with other young people and be able to implement nature into our daily lives rather than suddenly be reminded, oh yeah, we've got to take care of that. So outside of my academic studies, this has been absolutely amazing to meet so many other wonderful people that share a passion for nature. And I've learned so much about UK wildlife outside of theory, being able to actively see wildlife and identify it and talk to so many different people and make connections that I never thought I would be able to without the Young People's Forum. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Matthew. I'm the chair of the Young People's Forum. For those who don't know me, I'm 21 years old. I'm a final year zoology student, and I've just come to the end of my placement year with the Wildlife Trust, and I'd like to share some key highlights. This year really helped me promote my passion and just love for green space overall. I also really found it helped me kickstart my career as a science communicator. So some of the things I got to take part in was promoting green space to local college students. I got as far as Cambridge to promote the new natural history GCSE to GCSE students, as well as I was lucky enough to take part in designing, creating, and even leading environmental workshops to local students with the help of Youth Network as part of their climate conference. I was lucky enough to help out in youth ranger sessions, even going so far as to lead my own nature walks. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alfie. I've just started my second year of my degree in geography. I like to spend lots of time outdoors. I volunteer with other organisations such as Letchworth Heritage Foundation as a green space volunteer. I've also been involved with the Young Wilders who do lots of events, but they're rewilding a patch of land near Audley End, which is great. I have a particular interest in wetlands, and I recently wrote a blog about the Fens, which is on the website, if you want to take a look. Yeah, I've learned a lot since being at the Young People's Forum, and I've really enjoyed it so far.
So one of our other projects has been meeting MPs, and as part of this, Jonathan and I met Daniel Zeichner, who's the MP for Cambridge, back in January. He's now current Environment Minister, and some of the things that we discussed included sewage pollution, where he said he would have tough new sentences, and also the energy transition, which was particularly topical at the time in regards to all of the North Sea oil licenses that were being dished out at that time. Also, we discussed neonicotinoids, and he said that under his watch they would not be in use, and I'm sure everyone here knows what neonicotinoids are. Also, back in April, we met the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, Nick Johnson, where we discussed some more local issues, such as transport, as that accounts for quite a large percentage of CO2 emissions, as well as the peatland degradation, which clearly the Wildlife Trust are very interested in. So in future, we plan to have more letters to MPs and hopefully more meetings.
In July, we were lucky enough to head to my, local and personal favorite reserve, Bradgers Hill, where Matt led us to an IDing butterflies. He gave a brilliant presentation talking about all the various species we could find on the hill and how to actually identify them. We went about sweep netting on the hill to find various different species, and it was just a lovely day. We were also joined by the local youth rangers for Bedfordshire, as well as the Wildlife Trust London Young People's Forum as well.
We've been doing lots of outreach lately. We were at Peterborough Youth Fest, which I think is the first time that the event was put on by Peterborough Youth Council, and we sort of signposted young people to opportunities in the Wildlife Trust. We also presented to the Cambridge local natural history group in April, and we were sort of doing a similar sort of things we're doing here, presenting our work so far. And we had a super engaged audience who asked loads of questions. It was great. And we're doing a similar thing to the Flip Vale local group in November online.
The forum also led a youth walk at Trumpington Meadows during Youth Week in August. Jonathan and Callum gave an overview of Trumpington Meadows whilst we walked. During the walk, we also looked at some moth traps the night before. We did some sweep netting, spoke about hay cutting and why it takes place. At the pond, we saw bird life and dragonflies. I found a wasp spider during the walk. I explained that these spiders build their webs low to the ground and often go unnoticed. It was good to be able to show the young people attending the walk the wasp spider. Callum also spoke about sustainable drainage systems, water-based wildlife, and gave an overview of chalk streams. There'll be more of these youth walks in the future.
So earlier in the year, around late July, early August, Ethan and I both headed up to our local nature reserve, which is Rushton Lakes, within End Valley Wetlands, and we were guided by the lovely Katie King, and she absolutely was amazing. She helped us set up all sorts of workshops, guided walks, field work, social media, and it was just great to have an experiment and just get a great feel for all the different types of fields of work that we can be finding in conservation. And so it was amazing to be able to work with younger children and their parents, older people and disadvantaged people. And it was great to get some hands-on field work and then also more on the communication side. And additionally, we had a bit of a tour of the beaver area, had a bit of a talk through, and Ethan's really taken a lead on it, and he's helped in writing a script which might end up with a video concerning the beaver project.
All right, so in April, a little bit of time ago, we went down to Suffolk as the entire Young People's Forum, and we had an amazing visit there. We got to experience like a lot of bird life, which we might have not been able to see in our part of the country, such as like, I think, marsh harriers, nuthatches, great-crested grebes, and especially nightingales. We got an amazing sighting of one singing, which was apparently quite unusual. We were planning to meet the Suffolk Youth Board there, but unfortunately they couldn't make it, so we hope to be able to meet them at a future date in 2025.
So we have also produced a video to be shared on social media and the Young People's Forum website, which introduces ourselves and hopefully will inspire other young people to stand up for nature and engage more with the conservation movement. We filmed at Strawberry Hill in May. I personally was involved in the kind of behind the scenes, so you won't see me in the video, and was edited by our very own Harrison, who did an excellent job. So it's part of our effort to engage young people and integrate them more into the Wildlife Trust BCN's work. And we should hopefully get to view it now if we are not too pressed for time.
Hey there, we have a question for you.
When we say environment, what do you think of? How do you feel?
Maybe indifferent.
Maybe concerned.
Maybe hopeless.
It doesn't have to be that way.
You can make your voice heard.
We are the Wildlife Trust Young People's Forum, and we are working to make young people's voices heard.
So basically, the Wildlife Trust is a collection of charities across the UK working towards the safeguarding and preservation of nature.
Our group is made up of 13 to 24-year-olds who are passionate about the wildlife and the youth voices.
And we are just one part of a network of forums just like ours up and down the country.
We all know that the natural world is in peril, but we are not helpless. You can make a difference.
The most powerful weapon you have in this battle is your voice.
So use it. Whether that's in your local community, your school, your university, or national government.
We are empowering your voice.
The solutions to the problems the world face are within reach.
They have been for a long time, so we need to act now.
As young people ourselves, we know the future can seem intimidating, but together we can change this.
We are inheriting the earth, so let's kickstart change today.
But the Young People's Forum is not just a campaign strategy.
It is a space where you can be yourself and pursue your passion for the natural world.
Every one of us feels very passionate about the wildlife, and we want to share that with you.
If you are interested in our work, or you want to get involved, please visit our page on the Wildlife Trust BCN website,
where you will find blogs, updates and more information on what we do and how you can be a part of it.
We are the Wildlife Trust Young People's Forum.
So one of our projects as the PE editors of the magazine, I'm sure will be aware, is a magazine takeover, which is where we've been invited to help edit the winter edition of the magazine by suggesting some ideas. I personally, of course, we all know I've got a passion for chalk streams now, so I suggested that. And Jonathan took a lead on drafting the introduction, so I hope you all enjoy it when it's out for the winter season. So what's next? Well, as I'm sure all of you are aware about the Beaver Reintroduction Project, unless some of you have been sitting under a rock in the last few months, we are hoping to make a trip to the Nen wetlands and see it all in action next year. Also, considering the success of our youth walk back in August, we are hoping to have further youth walks to engage more people and more social media videos to engage a wider audience of young people who might not already be interested in nature.
We haven't spoken to any MPs since the change in government, so we'd like to speak to them with regards to what they want to achieve in the next 5 years with the environment. Many young people lose their love of nature during their teenage years at school, so we want to reach out to schools to try and sort of make sure they carry on that love of nature. And we're also currently brainstorming ideas for more workshops for young people for Youth Week 2025 in the summer.
So what's next? Again, involvement with fundraising, as we are a charity after all and always need more money. Presenting to the Flipvale local group, although this has been moved online, as well as meeting up with more wildlife trusts, young people's forums, as well as youth ranger groups to build a network of support across the wider area. And so what do we need to achieve our goals? Over the last 20 minutes or so, we've been discussing our work as a small group of young people over the last year. But as a small group of young people, as much as we'd like to feel it, we can't tackle the whole of the environmental crisis. So I have a few quick asks for all of you. Help spread the word about the importance of the natural world. Get the information out there and share it with people. Over the last few weeks, in relation to disasters in North America, particularly Helene and Milton, we have seen the spread of disinformation. So it's important that all of you can make a difference by spreading positive information about the environmental multi-crisis. But also emailing your MPs about issues such as sewage pollution and the climate crisis, because if they know their constituents care, they'll care an awful lot more. But joint campaigns to prevent nature loss is another great strategy. But some of the smaller things, like inspiring passion in young people you meet, because we know that this can last for a long time, and encouraging people to enjoy the benefits of nature, because it goes much further than just protecting it. It goes for mental health and general and physical health benefits as well. But the seemingly small acts, such as chatting to your friends, can inspire passion in them as well. So that's definitely worthwhile, and I'm sure all of you can do at least one of those things on there. So let me make that your challenge in the next few weeks. So, on that note, thank you very much for listening, and does anybody have any questions?
Setting a challenge for us all as well.
We've got one question in the back.
Okay, here comes Mike. So, question.
Because if the back, the back of the body of it is coloured like a wasp, it's black and white stripes. So I think that's why it's called one.
Thank you for your presentations. I just wondered, do you all live in different parts of the area, and how do you manage to get together?
So we are kind of quite evenly distributed between Cambridgeshire, Northamptonshire and Bedfordshire. So we will have most of our meetings online, so that kind of cuts down on the distance issue. But we also have regular in-person meetings, so we can discuss things in person and get a lot more, it's better to be face-to-face. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I wondered when you talk to your peers, to other people at school, at university, do you generally get a positive response that they get it, that they engage, or are you seen as the outsiders?
Well, I'd say I've been into schools, I've been into colleges, and then I speak to people around me. It tends to be a different mixed approach. I find certain age groups there's a level of disinterest, but then I think you find the odd individual will take that interest. But I think the key thing I've taken away from it, if you want someone to relate with like outside and green spaces, the important thing is finding their interest and how they can link it.
Any more questions? I don't see any, so thank you very much indeed. Okay, so it's really great to feel inspired. And I also feel that there's a challenge set to me to people I talk to say, are you a member of the Wildlife Trust? And if not, why not? Our membership is growing, but it's not growing as fast as it should, I suspect. So we can all help just by talking to people. Next, we've got Brian. Brian is been our CEO for a number of years and is a force of nature, I think you'll agree. So I won't do very much introduction, but invite you to come and talk to us about progress at Strawberry Hill.
Thank you, William. Thank you especially to our Young People's Forum. I had the great pleasure this week of proofreading the next issue of the magazine. You've a lot to look forward to. It's one of our best issues ever, and the fingerprints of this crowd are on every page. You can really see the passion, the special interests, and the energy that the young people are bringing to the Trust and which we need to share and to maintain. It's been an exciting year for the Trust. I have to, at this point, I think, pay tribute to your trustees because they've had the confidence to hold their nerve when we were trying to do two very big things simultaneously. We've been trying to kickstart our largest ever project in the Great Fen, restoring Speechless Farm, and fundraise to save Strawberry Hill. And most of you, I'm sure, have heard about Strawberry Hill. If not, again, you've probably been under that rock which Callum was talking about. It's a most fabulous place, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about this morning. I think I'll actually break with tradition and give you the most important item of news at the start. Thanks to your efforts, we've had our most successful fundraising campaign ever. The online total yesterday was £493,000. Last night, I had an email from a couple in Buckinghamshire. I should say the media profile of this site has been second to none. It's been our most successful public campaign. An article on the BBC website attracted attention of a couple who are generous supporters of wildlife. They said yesterday that their cheque for £1 million is transferring, so we expect to complete the purchase of the land at Strawberry Hill on Thursday or Friday next week. The slightly sad news is that the buildings, I'm afraid, were a step too far. We could possibly have raised the funds to buy them, but I had a site visit with the National Trust. They warned me that the restoration costs of the buildings would be closer to 10 million than 5, and that the annual maintenance costs would be £100,000 a year. And I'm afraid we are a wildlife charity, not a building charity, so that painful though it is to say goodbye to them, they're on the market. We've had some extremely attractive offers, and there's a slight chance we might even make a surplus on the sale of the buildings. So your trustees' confidence that we could do it, I think, has been well rewarded. And my job now is to explain why this really matters and why your support has actually been so powerful. To start with, Strawberry Hill itself is this sort of a triangular or a star-shaped area in the middle. You'll see there are woodlands surrounding it. The pattern of land use in this part of the world is that forest clearance started early. Before the Romans arrived, 90% of our woodlands had already been removed, and the tendency was that fragments of wood survived on the hilltops, and those are all on hilltops. Those who are visiting the site this afternoon will be able to look from Strawberry Hill across the arable desert to the hilltops and see that. Every settlement retained just about enough woodland to provide the timber and other wood that that settlement needed. And for several thousand years, buildings were timber framed. Timber was essential to everyday life. Oh, good idea, thank you. If we can put them off at this end of the room, that would be excellent. Someone's on the case, they'll sort it out if it can possibly be done. Right, Gosh, behave yourselves. So Strawberry Hill is unique in providing a new woodland on the valley bottom and the valley sides that has virtually disappeared from central England in the last 3,000-4,000 years. The trajectory for Strawberry Hill was almost an accident. It was a not very productive arable farm since the Second World War. It had been mixed farming with sheep grazing up to the war. In 1987, 88 and 89, the farm came out of production, was effectively let go, and almost all of it is tumbled down through arable to rough grass to light scrub to denser scrub, and it's just beginning to turn to woodland. I'll talk a bit more about that later. We visited the site first in May 2021 when it came on the market. I should say within a day of it going on the market, several Bedfordshire members had already emailed me saying you must do something about this place. My first visit I'll talk through in a moment, it was transformative. There was no doubt in my mind after the first couple of hours this place needed to be saved. We were very fortunate that a bunch of philanthropists and the Esme Fairbairn Foundation came forward to temporarily buy the site to give us the time to fundraise. We've now completed that process. In between times, as you will discover in the next few minutes, we've learnt a lot more about the place. The good news is first impressions were correct. The site is at least as important as we imagined, perhaps even more so. And the news today is we have succeeded and the land at Strawberry Hill is safe. The first impression is of miles and miles of footpaths, a grand scale of landscape with diverse scrub and flower-rich grassland. And arriving there in May, the major impression was of bird song on a scale I'd not heard in 30 or 40 years. I'll talk you through some of the bird species later, but the volume of bird song, the diversity of the breeding bird community is remarkable, and the densities are something I've not seen in ages. It's a big site, it's a diverse site. We talk a lot about biodiversity in the conservation sector. We don't talk enough about bioabundance. This is one of those places where the density of wildlife of all kinds is such, it has the potential to help recolonise the rest of Bedfordshire. We're working with local authorities and government agencies to set up a local nature recovery strategy. The network from that needs nodes on that network, hotspots of wildlife which can spread out. A lot of sites are too small to build up big populations. The size of Strawberry Hill means those populations are big enough to provide the surplus plants and animals to colonise. The beetle at the bottom left, one or two of you may be aware I have a passing interest in beetles. That species I'd only seen once before in my life, about 10 years ago. It landed on my car before I'd even set foot on Strawberry Hill. It's nationally scarce, it lives in Deadwood. This one I think is from one of the old hedgerows near Strawberry Hill. It was almost as if the site wanted me to notice it. I was so impressed on the first daytime walk around, I hung around for the evening, and that evening I heard 8 nightingales singing simultaneously. I hadn't heard 8 nightingales together since my teenage days up in Yorkshire on a site which alas has now lost its nightingales. We heard turtle doves on our first visit. This year the count is 9 singing turtle doves. It's increased since we've been there. Although the scrub is young, it's covered in lichens. Strawberry Hill is big enough that the middle parts of it have clean air, screened from surrounding pollution. So it's a rich lichen site. And it has that phenomenon the Victorians wrote about and the rest of us has possibly imagined but never actually seen. Clouds of butterflies, high densities of common species, and we think scope for scarcer species too. If I press once or twice more, you may be able to visualise this in a way that I can't describe.
Strawberry Hill, a 150-hectare ex-arable farm, has been gradually rewilding since it was taken out of production.
Strawberry Hill, a 150-hectare ex-arable farm, has been gradually rewilding since it was taken out of production in 1988. Where there were once ploughed fields, a dense mass of scrub, dominated by hawthorn and blackthorn, has erupted. A scattering of mighty oaks tower over the scrub, a window into the site's agricultural past. Dare to venture into the massive scrub, and you will find that pockets of tussocky grassland and lost ponds cling on, forming a rich mosaic of hidden habitats. You can join our site using the footpaths and bridleways connecting to the hamlets of Notting and Notting Green. You will catch glimpses of our grasslands, recently grazed by our Highland cows, before venturing along corridors of thick scrub, interspersed with a scattering of grassy glades. The central bridleway, running east from the road, is home to a number of our rare scrub-loving birds. Visit in early spring for a chance to hear the remarkable song of the nightingale, with its tropical tones projecting over and above those of our smaller shrubland birds, such as the willow warbler, blackcaps and whitethroats. Our second point of interest is a new path which connects the central public footpath, which runs alongside our stream, to our east-west bridleway. My volunteers worked hard to open up an old farm track, long ago hidden in the scrub. And in doing so, we have uncovered a flower-rich passage, which at its southern end offers up vast and sprawling views of the scrub at Strawberry Hill. Within the open grasslands and grassy glades found within the scrubby habitats, we've found many wet-loving plants like meadowsweet, wild angelica and common fleabane. But intriguingly, we have also found several plants that are more typical of dry soils, such as common century with its vibrant pink flowers, and yellowwort, typically found in limestone-rich soils. This plant in particular hints at Strawberry Hill's position on the edge of the Yardley-Whittlewood Ridge, a Natural England National Character Area, defined by a ridge of limestone within a sea of clay. Our volunteers have already begun helping us manage the grasslands along the stream. The impact of just one cut can clearly be seen when comparing either side of the path. There is less thatch, fewer dominant grasses, and more space for a diversity of plants to push up through the sward. In summer, butterflies flit about the wet-loving angelica and hempegrimony. Eventually, we hope to replace manual labour with the munching power of cattle on our grasslands. These ecosystem engineers can have a hugely transformative effect on the habitats we have here at Strawberry Hill.
It gives you a perspective of a site that you never get as you're walking around, and some of us occasionally dream about being able to fly. The technology now allows us to do that. And Strawberry Hill, as we've seen, is a place that really needs it. It can look a bit like a sort of narrow corridor with dense scrub if you're not careful. Just peer over the edge of it and you see those marvellous clearings. And it's that mix of habitats that makes it really special. This is the nightingale map from the first year that we're involved. Similar numbers, slightly more, I think, this year than last. There's nowhere else in central England that can match this site anymore. And the reason is that diversity of scrub and the proximity of scrub to insect-rich grasslands. We're very fortunate that the site's been popular with naturalists for a long time. We're gradually accumulating historical records to map the succession and the colonisation from arable to grassland to scrub. But knowing how willow warblers have declined in southern and eastern England in the last 20 or 30 years, to see that density of territories is really quite something. And again, it speaks volumes for Bedfordshire naturalists that there are people that are willing to get up and get out there and survey during the dawn chorus. I've turned up at Strawberry Hill at 8 o'clock in the morning when the first shift of bird surveyors are already leaving, which says something about their dedication. Whitethroat, the classic scrub bird, they're in profusion, particularly along some of the rides. You can just picture that and try to translate it into a soundscape. It's loud. You don't have to listen carefully for birdsong. It assails you the moment you enter the place. Blackcaps. On most sites, I expect to see 2 or 3 blackcaps as I walk around. To see 43 males holding territory on one site is something really, really remarkable. And there are scarce species of other sorts as well. The only other place I've heard 6 cuckoos at a time is in the Great Fen. I think that speaks volumes. It's putting Strawberry Hill in that class of sites alongside Wood Walton Fen or Wicken Fen, the New Forest. It's one of those places that local and regional naturalists already know. I think it's going to become a very famous site for all British naturalists over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And 10 of the 12 Bedfordshire bat species there already is quite remarkable, and always a delight if you see tussocky grass. Get on your hands and knees, look around, and apart from the wealth of invertebrates, you can find harvest mice nests there as well. I can't talk about any site without mentioning the odd insect, but Strawberry Hill justifies it more than anything else. On my first full day with the sweepnet on site, several species new to Bedfordshire. The horned tree hopper, this gorgeous little thing, occurs on a range of species. You see big spikes on its thorax. It's about 1 centimetre long, so it's a fair-sized animal. On most places where I found it, I found 1 or 2. At Strawberry Hill, I found 20 together. It's really remarkable, the densities and abundances of species. And every group that you look at, you find more things. Most remarkable, and the thing that probably explains the density of bird species, beating the hawthorn for caterpillars. A single beat, I could find 30 or 40 caterpillars of 8 or 10 moth species. And things like the winter moth are the primary food of most of our insect-eating songbirds, the blue tits, the great tits, and all the warblers. And those densities I'd never seen before, and I'm not alone in this. I'll talk about another entomologist's passion for the site shortly. Again, 1 or 2 of you may be aware I've spent a bit of time looking at elm trees in the last 6 years. This site has almost the full range of elm-feeding insects, galls. Bizarrely, you see a mouldy bit of grass and it turns out to be a species new to Bedfordshire. It's that sort of place. Whatever you look at, you find extra things. The commonest elm at Strawberry Hill is very definitely a Bedscamp's Northants elm species. Its type locality is at Hargrave, which is only about 3 miles from Strawberry Hill. Its total range is Northamptonshire, Huntingdonshire and Cambridgeshire. It's one of our elm microspecies. A good friend from his days in the Sussex Wildlife Trust, Graham is probably one of the top 3 or 4 field entomologists in this country. He makes his living these days being paid to do intensive surveys of rewilding sites. He's written the definitive review of the invertebrates, the insects and other invertebrates of Knepp in Sussex. He volunteered 6 days field work for us and another couple of days writing it up last year, and it was quite remarkable. He's surveyed almost every rewilded site in Britain. Strawberry Hill is among the very richest. There is 1 site in Sussex, not Knepp, 1 small site in Sussex that is somewhat richer in terms of total species. And Graham found all sorts of amazing things. Nationally scarce weevils, spiders new to Bedfordshire, nationally scarce spiders new to Bedfordshire, a red data moth. That strange cigar-shaped thing is the silken case of a small caterpillar, which protects itself with a case, and again, known from a handful of sites in Britain. Looking at the distribution of species, 1 of his scarce bee species, new to Bedfordshire from the south and west. A barclose he found, new to Bedfordshire, new to central England, from the north. We've got species of all sorts of geographic distributions turning up on this amazing and very special site. In the last couple of years, I should say last Christmas, I treated myself to a really nice microscope for the first time, and I've been playing with it ever since. And I've done microscope work in Cambridge and Bedfordshire, Northamptonshire, Norfolk, Suffolk, Yorkshire, and on prolonged holidays in Scotland. my first microscope day at Strawberry Hill, the moss on the wall outside the farmhouse had this gorgeous bristly millipede living in it. It had 3 species of tardigrade in it. One of my new passions, these things are called testate amoebae. The big ones are 1/4 millimetre across. They're basically blobs of amoebic jelly that make a little crystalline case. Some make a case like a donut, some like a flower vase of various shapes. This one's strange sort of, that circular in cross-section and flattened top and bottom. All these were species I had never seen before. There are only about 200 species in Britain. I've already seen over half of them. I've worked plenty of sites in this part of the world. Strawberry Hill is different. Something about its scale, something about the protection from pollution and spray drift makes Strawberry Hill uniquely special. One of the most attractive little flowers there, Slender Tear. The pale dots are historic records. The dark blue dots are modern records. It's disappearing rapidly, except in our part of the world. The ecological flora description is really quite distinctive. It says it likes clay soils, which are wet and flooded in winter. Strawberry Hill was very wet previous winter, and baked hard in summer. It's a perfect characteristic of this site, and there's a bigger population there than we've seen anywhere else. I've seen 2 or 3 flowers at Camborne. We've got almost literally acres of the stuff at Strawberry Hill. So rare species are abundant at this special site. And rather than me talk about them, we can now, I think, show you some of that wildlife. Wow. If you've never heard a nightingale, go to Strawberry Hill next April and May. If you have heard a nightingale, go to Strawberry Hill. It's one of those experiences of a lifetime to hear the song of a nightingale in profusion. Nightingales singing against each other because they're close together and they're maintaining their territories. You know birdsong is essentially a rude exclamation at your nearest neighbour to say, get away, this is my territory. There are so many that wherever you stand you can hear nightingales. From the farmhouse you can hear nightingales, from any of the rides, from much of the site on a still summer's evening you can hear 6, 8, 10, 12, and then you lose count. It's a remarkable experience. I should say none of the species you've just seen would have been rare in Britain 50 years ago or 100 years ago. They should not be rare. We should not actually be getting excited about nightingales. But they've declined so much. They've become special. And our job as conservationists isn't just to prevent rare species going extinct, important though that is to keep common species common. And in this part of the world, is to make common species common again. And I see Strawberry Hill as central to that mission as well. That our future is about using places like Strawberry Hill to repopulate the depleted countryside around us. One way we're achieving some of that is to actually have people visit and look and think. And here we have Natural England's Chief Scientist, our new chair, Craig Bennett, the National Chair, who was on Farming Today this morning at 6:30, if you're up in time. Our patron, Baroness Young, Tony Juniper, Chair of Natural England, and our own current Chair, William. People want to see Strawberry Hill. It is becoming a famous site among scientists, ecologists and conservationists. Richard in the foreground there is probably our leading bird ecologist of birds of woodland and scrub. And Richard Broughton said online that Strawberry Hill should be a national infrastructure project for nature. It's of national significance and it's providing that test bed. It's big enough that you can study birds within scrub and not worry about the edge effects from being outside of the scrub. Richard's been working at my old stamping ground of Monkswood for the last 20 years, and his patch of scrub at Monkswood is 10 acres. At Strawberry Hill, he now has 350 acres to play with, and it's life-changing. And the research side of Strawberry Hill, I think, is going to actually be nationally significant. We talk a lot about the climate crisis. You may have heard the announcement from Ed Miliband a week ago, £22 billion to be spent on mechanical and chemical measures for extracting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We have devices for capturing carbon dioxide. They're called trees and shrubs. And for £22 billion, we could provide him with an awful lot of trees and shrubs to capture an awful lot of carbon. The story with woodland is basically that peak carbon capture is somewhere in the first 50 years, and the annual sequestration is just a posh word for storage. That's how much new carbon is being stored year on year, and it declines. Total storage of carbon peaks somewhere between 100 and 200 years, depending on the tree species. There's an area of doubt and mystery here. We know that woodlands store carbon. Many of you will know that peatlands store carbon. Our Great Fen project is one of the pioneers of wet farming in order to keep the peat carbon in the soil, even when growing food crops. But one of our previous trustees, Professor David Going, has been researching wet meadows for the last 15 years, and his latest research shows that many meadow flowers have roots that go down into the soil by up to 7 meters. This is new knowledge, and you don't find it except by digging down and following them. It's hard work. He's now estimating that wet meadows store as much carbon per square meter as ancient forests does. So a mosaic of grassland and scrub has the potential to store even more carbon than mature forest. The fact is we don't know the answer. We know that woodland stores carbon, we now know that wet grassland stores carbon, and through our partnerships with universities and with the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, we're about to find out at Strawberry Hill how much carbon you store in that grassland, how much in the scrub, and over the next 30 or 50 years. Now, I have to say conservation is a very long-term game, and most of us won't be here to see the southern part of Strawberry Hill turn into mature forest. I have a suspicion I will share with you, though, and it's not all that positive. My hunch is that Strawberry Hill may be at its very best about now, that mosaic of grassland and scrub probably holds more wildlife than it will do for the next 200 years. And if we don't manage the site, it will turn from open scrub with grassland to closed hawthorn and blackthorn scrub to oak and ash woodland, and that secondary woodland will gradually shade out the scrub and the grassland, remove most of the butterflies, a high proportion of the insects, and it will take 200 years for those trees to mature and start dying. And ironically, it is when the forest trees start falling apart and creating natural clearings that the woodland starts becoming more interesting. So woodland creation, I'm afraid, is a very long, slow process compared with grassland, scrub, or even wetland creation. And for Strawberry Hill, the future I see is three-part management. One area of non-intervention. We will see what happens. The woodland may be more interesting than I give it credit for. It may be that other natural interventions or human-induced interventions, climate change, forest fires, make the woodland age faster and become more interesting more quickly. Probably not in any of our lifetimes. Central section I expect to be managed primarily with livestock. Those grazing animals will do a pretty good job to keep the scrub in its present configuration and keep the grassland open, but I think we need a different intervention elsewhere. The scrub, this is scrub when it's in full flower. One of the joys of North European woodland edges is that they're dominated by plants of the rose family which produce abundant flowers and then abundant berries. The scrub is mostly hawthorn and blackthorn. There's wild rose, there are brambles. It's full of fruit. As last evening I heard the first redwings flying over. As the redwings and fieldfares, the northern thrushes, land at Strawberry Hill, they've got an enormous food reserve. It's going to be a fabulous place for the next couple of months for those visiting migrant birds. But once it becomes high forest, it's dark and gloomy, the ground floor is thin and patchy except on the rides. And as I say, until those trees start maturing and falling over, they're not going to give you the diversity that we have. There was once an answer. Oliver Rackham, the great Cambridge woodland historian and ecologist, reckoned that the problem with modern English woodland is a lack of elephants. He was not joking. The straight-tusked elephant had occurred in northern European woods in every previous interglacial until this one. The present warm period between ice ages, alas, we are the problem. We exterminated the elephants. I don't think I'm advocating recreating straight-tusked elephants. I have to say, if we had a few bison, they'd do a pretty good job. But the best substitute for elephants is actually volunteers and staff with chainsaws. And I suspect those chainsaws will be out in the northern portion of Strawberry Hill to maintain something like its present scrub grass mosaic. These guys do a pretty good job. They also entertain the visitors. If you've never seen a newborn Highland cow, I can recommend it. They gambled like lambs. It bounced around all over the place at high speed and was something to witness. These, as grazing machines, are incredibly popular with visitors. They look fiercer than they are, and that has a great benefit. They deter dogs, and particularly dog walkers. I have to say, our grasslands with ground nesting birds can do better with Highland cows than they can with dogs. And physical management is going to be a key component of where we go from here. So the future of Strawberry Hill, I think, is now secure, safe, and rosy. Thank you, in large part, to yourselves, to our staff. I should say Chantal has taken more parties around Strawberry Hill than I think we've ever done in any previous site. The communications team has produced more videos, more drone footage, more interviews with people than we've ever done on any individual site, and it's made a difference. I think we've learnt a huge amount about how to use the media to take our course forward over Strawberry Hill, and it really does make a big difference. The range of wildlife, I think, justifies it completely. I'm sorry we won't have the buildings in the future, but for the sake of my successors, I think I'm not sorry. I think having a huge array of listed farm buildings in a terrible state of disrepair that you might have to invest £10 million in and then 100,000 plus inflation going forwards, it was probably a step too far. But one of our donors has specified some of their money is to make sure we continue to have a water supply, electricity, toilets and a small office at least. I'm hoping that office will have a classroom next to it. Fabulous site for teaching. It would be a marvellous place to run training workshops. It's already engaging the next generation. It's engaged members of every age and description. Local people love the site. they care about it, they're going to be willing to defend it. So thank you all who have supported the campaign. Thank you for all who have spread the word. I think this is the future of conservation and conservation research. And I think it could also be a nationally important site for that climate research into carbon storage. Because if we're right, then farmers have the potential to restore carbon-rich habitats without planting trees. Remember, not a single tree was planted over the vast area of Strawberry Hill. That's natural regeneration. Nature knows better than we do what will grow best where. And that mosaic of grassland and scrub, I hope and believe, could turn out to be the richest carbon store in the country, with the possible exception of peat bogs, and we like peat bogs too. So we're taking charge of the site next week. We managed it on a lease for the last 3 years. We're still learning, and if you talk to us about Strawberry Hill in a year's time or 5 years' time or 10 years' time, we'll know far more. The richness and diversity of the wildlife will be better understood. But what we can say is there's nowhere else quite like it, and it is now safe thanks to the work of your Wildlife Trust and you. So thank you very much indeed for your magnificent effort in supporting this. So, over to you. Questions about Strawberry Hill or frankly about anything else?
Thank you. As more people come to learn of the existence of Strawberry Hill and you have more and more visitors, how do you actually protect the site?
I think it's a place that can defend itself pretty well. I mentioned those glorious flower-rich, fruit-rich shrubs. Tangles of bramble, hawthorn and blackthorn are pretty impenetrable. Even dog walkers don't want to lose their dog into the dense scrub. So the fact that the ride network is fairly extensive and that it's bordered by scrub and things like stinging nettles, I mean, it really is a site that, wonderful though it is, it's not exactly enticing to make you want to walk far off the paths. My sense is that the grassland near where the buildings are will maintain as open grassland and grazed. That will support the skylarks. We'll probably try to keep that area dog-free. I don't think we can keep dogs off the network of footpaths and bridleways, but there are nice clearings with skylarks and meadowpipits nesting within the scrub, and the scrub itself, I think, defends it pretty well from... and I keep mentioning dogs. Casual visitors walking around the site I don't think will be a problem. Dogs would be if they were running freehold across the whole place. They will not do that.
This is more a plea than a question. I'm getting pretty ancient, and my walking is not as good as it used to be. Could we, as a policy for BCN Wildlife Trust, have places that people can sit down for a few minutes? I'm not suggesting multiple benches. What I was thinking of was logs with the top shaved off, or upended like stools, because you've got not only antiques like me, but also disabled people, people with kids, people who would appreciate sitting down. Even the young people might occasionally. And if there were places or tracks through different reserves, I mean, I'm thinking also of beavers. If you're going to be observing beavers, you don't want to be standing up for 3 hours. Personal opinion.
Thank you. I have to say I agree completely. And the lesson for me, actually, was talking with my late father. He remained active and independent into his 90s. He did his own shopping, but said as he got older, his shopping took longer because he needed to stop more often. Now, in his case, it was partly that he couldn't walk 100 yards without starting to talk to someone. And that, I think, was another part of why he had an active and healthy life. But he made the point to me that unless he could sit down every 200 yards or so, he couldn't go on a walk. And that's hugely important. And with frankly, an ageing population. I'm not thinking particularly in this room, though we are part of society, but in a country where people are going to be living longer and having longer active old age, we do need to cater for that. So point very well made, and I think we really need to think carefully about our attitude. We don't want the countryside to be full of big structures, but as you say, discrete tree stumps, log-based structures, the odd simple plank, can make a huge difference to accessibility. So thank you for raising that really important point.
Sorry if I'm being a bit greedy, but I've got 3 points. The first was that I'd heard that you hadn't found any hedgehogs on the site, and I wondered if that was true and whether they might be able to be restored. The second question is, I do hope that you might have some influence over who buys the buildings and maybe find some sympathetic buyer that could do something with them that would be complementary to what you're doing at the nature reserve. And the third question is, I very much mourn the loss of the treetop walk at Southsea Forest, which was so beautiful, and I hope that now you might be able to do something similar at Strawberry Hill. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. I've not seen a hedgehog there myself, and I've not seen hedgehog droppings. I don't know if there's anybody from the site within earshot. We'll try to get back to you on that one. If hedgehogs are not there, then I suspect it's because the habitat was already isolated when it was created. I wouldn't have expected hedgehogs on the arable fields before the site developed, and the links to surrounding woodlands at the moment are pretty feeble, so it's not going to be an easy place to colonise. So, interesting question as to what we do about that, and one we'll take on board. We are looking at the sorts of people interested. We've just got the final offers in, or the penultimate offers in, for both the farm building and the farmhouse. And we are looking at who the people are and what their interests are, and frankly, how trustworthy they sound, in addition to how much are they willing to pay. The good news is some of the higher offers are coming from people with a pretty good reputation. So we may be able to square the circle and find wildlife-friendly, fingers crossed wildlife trust-friendly, residents for the farmhouse, and, at least initially, sympathetic people managing the buildings. There's also the prospect of putting covenants on the land. The challenge for our trustees will be that covenants reduce the value. So the more restrictive you are about future use, frankly, the less money you get. And at the very least, I want us to be able to pay off the complete loan and all the legal and land agency fees over the site. And if we've got some money for this final setup, so much the better. And the third question, treetop walk. Yeah, I really like the idea. A few years back, we had an even bolder vision, which, alas, the funding didn't arrive, which was that in the Great Fen, it's a site that needs a different style of grazing, and the ideal species, we thought, would have been bison. And the idea of a herd of bison that's shared between the birch woodland of Home Fen and the open habitats of Rhymes Reedbed could have been splendid. And oddly enough, it was our finance director at the time, Charlotte Kane. Now I have to say MP for Ely. So we have at least one conservationist friend in the House of Commons. And Charlotte, who used to work at the Forestry Commission, said, how about a treetop walk looking down at the bison? That would have been very exciting. I have to say our health and safety team thought excitement isn't necessarily a good thing always. The Salsey Forest example is an interesting one because I think the reason that's not there anymore is a combination of maintenance replacement cost. If there's funding available, it's the sort of thing that would be very interesting to do, and even a short raised walk. And it doesn't need to be hugely high up, both to give you a view and to give you that sense of walking round the canopy of an oak tree. It is a very different experience. I have been up to the... at NEP they actually have essentially platforms around the top of the trunk of large oak trees. And even that gives you a different flavour of things. The safety side of it is a nightmare, but we've got the idea. We will seriously think about it because it would be a fantastic attraction and a way to experience the site in a totally different way.
Is Strawberry Hill Farm ready for hundreds of visitors per day?
There's a large network of public footpaths and bridleways. and has been all the way through, so that could have happened at any point. My hope and expectation is that, like most sites, visitors who arrive will do a relatively short circuit. A few will go right the way around the outside, but my guess is that in 10 years' time we will still be able to find quiet, secluded corners where it's just us and the birdsong. So in the dry season, I won't say summer because this country's seas are a little bit flexible these days. In the dry season, the network of paths, as I hope you'll see this afternoon, is reasonably solid and straightforward walking. It should be able to accommodate quite large numbers of visitors without an impact on the wildlife. The one thing I do regret occasionally on sites that I've loved before they became nature reserves is when you can't find anywhere to stand or sit where you don't see people walking past you all the time. But that's a rare event, and even popular reserves, you don't have to go far from the beaten track to find the seclusion that you want. So I'm not over worried by visitor numbers. I am worried about the types of visitor, and I think Strawberry Hill could be managed in a way that gets people who appreciate the site. Was there a follow-up to that?
So is there a car park and visitor centre that's going to be manned full-time, like at some of these?
There isn't a car park yet. That's high on our list of priorities, partly because our neighbours in the village detest on-street parking. So we do need to arrange some form of safe off-road parking sooner rather than later. The hope is to have a small building there for the staff who are based there and to run events and potentially teaching on site. I suspect this will happen in stages. We'll have a sort of makeshift building. It may be something as crude and simple as a second-hand porter cabin for the first few years. If you know our site at Paxton Pits, where we have a timber-built dedicated education centre with office space, I think that works really well, and that was not an expensive building. So compared with the £10 million to restore the listed farm buildings, we could have a perfectly adequate education and visitor facility for something like £700,000 to £800,000 probably. So that's the direction of travel that I see. I would like the site to be well used for outreach and education. The structure of the habitats and the lack of designations is not a protected site. It means it would work very well for things like forest schools. And I was chatting with Louise, our education director yesterday, engagement director yesterday, and the thought is that with a small team of staff, we could teach perhaps 5% of children in our 3 counties, but we could teach 50% of school teachers. And the idea that every school was well set up to teach the new GCSE in natural history when we hope it comes on stream, but also set up to run their own forest schools in their grounds or on nearby sites, I think could actually transform the lives of young people. Because my impression is schools do not take you out of doors anything like us enough. So if we can help do that by giving the teachers the confidence to go out of doors, I think that would be a really big game changer. I think there's another question. Then we do have a question at the front as well.
I'm concerned Notting is a very small village. There's very little room for parking. How many visitors are you expecting, and where are they going to be?
They'll be on site. They'll be on the car park that we've provided. So they will not be parking on street. We've been very clear all the time that on-street parking in Notting just is not, in Notting Green or indeed Notting near the church, there's very few parking spaces there. We need to provide that, and we need always to provide a bit more capacity than the visitor numbers require.
I was really pleased to hear that you're thinking about links to Strawberry Hill out into the surrounding woodland, because that was something that was in my mind, and it's great to know you thought about it.
Yeah, if you do go on site today or in the future, you will see there are patchy hedgerows radiating from Strawberry Hill. I think our neighbours are fairly sympathetic, so we may be able to boost those hedgerows into shelter belts or lines of trees at least, so there could be that connectivity. I have to say, when you said we're thinking of links, I did do a double take, because one imagines that an area of scrub like that might suit medium-sized predators as well, but that is not on our current agenda.
That's for the future.
Indeed, somebody else's choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a slightly different question. You were mentioning I can't remember exactly what the plant was, that does very well with very wet conditions in the winter and very dry conditions in the summer. How does that exactly work? And are the other plant species in this site well adapted going forward with more extreme flooding and more extreme droughts as climate change worsens?
Mixed. So the scarce species, the smooth tear, is an annual plant that spends its winter as dormant seeds. And those dormant seeds, I suspect, gradually the seed coat rots down when they're waterlogged, and that's what allows them to germinate the next year, which is why they don't do well on permanently dry sites. Some of the other plants there, a common and rather attractive plant with bright yellow flowers, silverweed, is very well adapted to seasonal flooding, and some of the grass species are well adapted to seasonal flooding. If the flooding becomes more prolonged, and if we find ourselves with wet springs going into sort of May, June or July, then we'll see an increase in plants like meadowsweet and angelica, which can cope with year-round waterlogging, and a decline in some of the others. But as you see the site, you'll see there's enough topography there that even if the lower lying parts become seasonally very, very wet, and the season extends from, say, September through till April or May, there'll still be plenty of dry sites elsewhere on Strawberry Hill. The fact of it being a hill actually does help us with this. So we can have the full range of ecological conditions. So there will be changes with the changing climate. I don't know what's going to happen, but Strawberry Hill is big enough and diverse enough to cope. And actually that's a fundamental point. The idea that Trust put across back in 2000 about living landscapes and moving to landscape scale is about climate change adaptation and giving you the full range of conditions. So be it hotter or drier or wetter or cooler, somewhere on site will actually maintain the conditions for the full set of species. So one over here, and then if you move that around the other side, you might encourage some questions. If we're still on time.
I know it's sort of been mentioned, but I just wondered, you say all the buildings are now separately up for sale, whether or not that would have any impact on accessibility to Strawberry Hill.
No, it's our job to make sure it doesn't. So,
parking and everything as well. I was just sort of wondering, sort of the properties that are up for sale, what land that includes in the sale.
So the farmhouse comes with its Victorian garden and very little else at the moment. We have offered paddocks next door, anything from 1 acre to 4 acres adjoining it. The farm buildings come just with the curtilage and the modern barns, so there's no wildlife habitat affected. There's we have the right, we can maintain the right of access through the present entrance to a route behind the buildings if we choose to. Long term, I suspect we may use a different entrance slightly further north and out of the village so that more visitors enter the site north of the buildings, so towards Notting rather than Notting Green, so fewer people will actually drive through Notting Green village, and they'll be able to access the site discreetly and essentially out of sight, so they won't be disturbing our neighbours.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions from the silent side of the room?
Brian, I know that you spent the first couple of years surveying to make sure you understand what's on site, particularly when you don't actually own it in full. But now that you move on to full ownership, the lady mentioned about hedgehogs. Which species haven't managed to make the jump into the site, and which species are you thinking are missing and might need to be introduced?
That's quite a big question, because I don't know what we compare it with. If you're creating a meadow, you can look at the best meadows in Bedfordshire and say it should have those things on there. And indeed for the grasslands, we may decide to start harvesting green hay from neighbouring species-rich meadows and strewing that hay to bring some of the plant species. The things that are doing really well at Strawberry Hill, you may have noticed, are birds and insects. They can mostly fly, so they can get there. A lot of the plants may have been there in the seed bank from the 1940s, 30s, 20s, when the site had sheep grazing on it, so quite a lot of permanent grassland. The shrubs and the trees are things with bird-dispersed seeds from berries or wind-dispersed seeds like ash trees. So what we're lacking is plants with big heavy seeds that don't travel far. There's the odd ancient woodland plant. There is things like dog's mercury because there used to be ancient woodland on the northeastern edge of the site, I think it was. That was cleared during the 19th century, but there's a bridle way beside it, so I suspect there will have been big old trees along there. So there are elements of the ancient woodland flora there already. I personally try to be patient and try to find out before we do anything else. So a couple of years survey, we've got a pretty good list of species, but there's a lot more survey to do. The point I made earlier about the scrub being fairly impenetrable means that large parts of the site will not be visited by people, and finding out what's there will be a longer, slower process. So I'm in no great hurry to start reintroducing lots of things. And as I said with the tree planting, I tend to feel nature knows best, and nature will actually provide the species that we need. Improved connectivity, yes, the linkages to other sites, particularly to the ancient woodlands on the neighbouring hilltops. I say hilltops, these are not mountains. These are rising 5 or 10 metres above the level of Strawberry Hill. So the species don't have to negotiate massive mountain cataracts to get down from the top of the hill to Strawberry Hill.
I've got a question about the sale of the house, which you did sort of mention. You are currently looking at people who are going to be sympathetic to the site, and you also mentioned that covenants could be a restrictive factor. But what safeguards are there going to be for the future, sort of many years ahead, or even sort of like 10, 20 years? Say if they want to sell the house, how can you safeguard the sale of the house? It's going to go to people who are going to be sympathetic to the area.
The honest answer is we can't guarantee it. What we can guarantee is that we own the nature reserve and we have the rights to manage that site. I suspect within the room there may be the odd person who has occasionally had an annoying neighbour who didn't really suit. There's not a lot we can do about that. What I can say is that it's a farmhouse next to a nature reserve now. That will put up the price. There'll be a premium for buying a house near a nature reserve. You would hope, and the current sale suggests, quite a lot of the people looking to live there do so because of where it is. They want to be next to the nature reserve. I see that as a really good sign. I have to say our own staff on site are some of the most charming, engaging, intelligent people you could hope to meet. We will be good neighbours to them, and I'm hopeful that whoever lives there now or in 5 or 20 years' time will actually appreciate having the Wildlife Trust as a neighbour. I think they do in Camborne. We've got 5,000 neighbours in Camborne, and they seem mostly to get on okay with us.
Right, okay, I think that's a good point at which to stop. And, okay, we'll allow one more, there you are.
Nice try, William.
Sorry, it is a comment, not necessarily a question. I was just, in all the speaking, there seems to be the wealth of what's been purchased and what's been attained is through the 50 years that humans haven't been involved in Strawberry Hill. And the diversity that's there is because there hasn't been any management or input put into the site. And in the talk, there's a big temptation to try and manage the site now going forward to keep it and what the opportunities are, what we could introduce. And maybe, I think you're already talking that nature does the best option as to what can just be left alone, often does better than what we can manage to put into place. That was all.
I'd agree with that. I would, though, go back to Oliver Rackham's point that in the absence of elephants, scrub becomes rather dull woodland for a couple of hundred years. And I'm not sure that our members would like that, the whole of the site to be boring secondary woodland for the duration. So until someone provides the elephants, then I think we will provide the chainsaws.
Okay, and on that note, it's coffee time. 2 minutes, yes. Laura.
Just before you go on your refreshment break, can I just please ask everyone to be very, very mindful that the floors are quite slippy on the way down to the catering area, so please do take care. And also, if you can use your cups from this morning, as mentioned in the welcome briefing pack sent to you all, we have a very limited supply of our recyclable cups, so if you have still got yours, please do take it with you. And we've got a slops bucket, so we'll certainly be able to help you out there. Other than that?
Yes, and so please be back for 12 o'clock for the gripping AGM. Thank you very much.
Hello, can I just ask the award winners to stay behind for 5 minutes as well, please? If you are collecting an award, just come see me at the stand. That'll be lovely. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Sorry, still doing shouting mode with the microphone. Welcome back. This is the bit you've all been waiting for. So without further ado, I shall hand over to our president for a few minutes more at least, Michael Allen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sure I don't deserve the applause, but I'm very glad to see so many of you here and to be taking part in the management of this very remarkable trust. I once discovered that I had seen what were in those days the 47 wildlife trusts in Britain. I'd visited each one of them. They didn't let me go to an island which was offshore. But I must say that being a member of this trust is a very remarkable thing. And I'm sure that many people don't understand just how hard your team works until they've joined and seen them in action. And I think everything I've heard so far this morning, including those who I missed this year, but I heard you last year, would just confirm that this is a very remarkable institution. We have to carry out our responsibilities as an organisation, and that's what we are going to do. And you're going to help us prepare the work of the year to come. Now, there are several things I do want to say, which are really practical. Thank you to those of you who have submitted questions in advance. We shall answer them under any other business. Those in the room should feel free to ask questions during the AGM. Those who are streaming, whatever that may be, may do so by emailing agm@wildlifebond.org or calling a telephone number, which I shall read twice. I might get it wrong. 01954 713 500. We won't be able to answer them today, but staff and trustees will respond directly over the next week. Here in the room, at various points, I shall be asking for members, and my successor will be asking for members, either to propose or second a resolution. To do so, please raise your hand and say your name as clearly as possible and in full. One of my colleagues will then read out the name of the first person to do so if there's a competitive response. I'm now going to hand over to William, who will read out the apologies and advise on proposing or seconding a resolution. William.
You hear? Yes, you can. Okay. So we have apologies from 26 members and from 4 trustees who were unable to be here. Kimberly Coleman, Matthew Day, Catherine Hageman, and actually Rebecca is here. Rebecca Stock is not here, but and then 2 committee members, Rob Hall and Rainer Schulte. The members who sent their apologies are Lorna Barford, Janet Betts, Anna Blomfield, Hayley Cannon, Dave Cleal, Lynn Cleal, Frank Faulkner, Harriet Faulkner, Brian Gilbert, Colin Harris, June Hutley, Martin Izzard, Daphne Mayer, and Maggie Memory, Lena Malbrennan, Peter Pelbeam, Rosemary Surridge, Linda Sutherland, Graham Taplin, and Stephen Yates. And I think it must be the first time in 50 years that Peter Pelbeam hasn't actually made it. So thank you for those apologies. In terms of voting, that we have the proxy votes from members who are online. If you have already voted and happen to be here, then please don't vote again because it might skew the numbers. You never know. I have the results of the votes from the online, which I'll be announcing at each resolution. And our President will ask for those for, those against, and any abstentions. We won't count the numbers in the room unless you want to be here well into the latter half of the afternoon, unless there is a very distinct dichotomy in terms of for and against. So that's the way we'll do it. Okay, so in that case, I'll hand back to you, Michael, for the first resolution.
Thank you, first of all, for leaving me a space, William. My last pleasurable task as your president is to conduct the election of a new president. And Council proposes Professor Sapatha Dasgupta. Now, many of you have seen Partha in action, well known to those of you, since he became a vice president of the Trust in 2021 and spoke at our annual meeting in 2021. He is probably Britain's leading environmental economist and has lived in Cambridge since 1985. In February 2021, his report for the government on the economics of biodiversity, the Dasgupta Review, was published by HM Treasury. But more than that, Sapatha and Lady Carol Dasgupta are long-standing members of this important society. They have attended several events, and during that time, their biography has been posted on the Trust's website for you to see. Sapatha Dasgupta is the Frank Ramsey Emeritus Professor of Economics at the University of Cambridge, a Fellow of St. John's College, Cambridge, having moved here in 1985 as Professor of Economics. His publications and honours are too numerous to list here, but he was appointed Knight Bachelor in the Queen's Birthday Honours in 2002 for services to economics and elected a Fellow of the Royal Society in 2004. I feel that it is a privilege for me to be able to hand on the President's role to such a distinguished member of the Trust. Now we have the resolution. Council proposes that Sapatha Dasgupta serves as President of the Trust. He's proposed by Council, and we now need a seconder for the proposition. Your first chance. Don't all rush. We've got Graham Pry. Thank you. And now can I have a show of hands in the room in favour of the proposition? I don't think I can count that high. Can I ask if there is anyone against the proposition? Then it's NEMCON. And William, can you tell me how many people have voted in?
We have 146 votes by proxy votes on 145 against, none against.
In that case, I'm happy to pass the matter on for the meeting to pass. Congratulations. Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. And I wanted to say a few words before assuming the presidency, because my wife and I have been members of the Trust for many years now. And I'm an economist, so in a way, your antenna should be up to wonder what an economist is doing with nature. And we're usually bad news, as you know, as a profession. We really are. There's no ifs and buts about it, and I'm not... I'm a card-carrying economist, that's for sure, but that doesn't, there are things that are really awry in the profession. It's not hostility towards nature. I've increasingly come to be convinced that it's the neglect of nature comes out of unawareness. It's not part of the agenda. Even economists go for walks and they collect butterflies and so forth. I have friends who do that. But in the day-to-day life, it doesn't appear. So nature doesn't enter into economic modeling. It's literally absent. And you probably noticed that. And so one of my hopes here is to use this year to promote the subject. And I've been doing that for many years, with no success, of course. But one can but hope. It's one of the things one wants to do. I was raised as a mathematician, and I'm not a naturalist, to my regret. My wife is, but I am not. And I'm still learning. And in deep sense, actually, one of the pleasures of assuming the presidency has been, so far, getting to know Brian, who is an outstanding naturalist himself. And he has been teaching me through, although not in a conscious way, but I sort of probe and and you could see from his account this morning how deeply embedded he is in our neighborhood, large neighborhood. So I I hope very much I'll be able to serve you well. And I see my role in some ways, at least initially, to engage the attention of the University of Cambridge to the Trust, because there's this kind of a bulldozer aspect to institutions like colleges and the university at large. And I've increasingly felt that even though we talk about the big things, climate change, biodiversity loss, writ large through the world, and I write about it too, but in some deep sense what makes biodiversity so much more interesting a subject for the citizen than, say, climate change, is that the latter is somewhat remote. We're all very small. We can't really affect the big thing out there, the climate that envelopes us. We can do persuasion, but it needs collective action at a higher level. Whereas in biodiversity preservation, conservation, restoration is very often, usually, a local phenomenon. And I think that's where the action is. We can manage our own garden, if you like, as well as we can. And that's not going to help the rest of it necessarily, but if each tends to his own garden, so to speak, there is a future there. I'm going to be working closely with Brian, who will be advising me, training me, as it were. And I will do what he says. Thank you very much. Of course, I have to start work now. Yes, I forgot. So, Draft minutes of last year's meeting have been posted to the website, and I hope everyone has had a chance to look at them. Members who were at the last AGM are asked to approve the minutes as a true record of the meeting. So, may I ask for a proposer to approve the minutes of the 2023 AGM? May I have a proposer?
Charles Chadwick Healy.
Okay. A seconder?
Martin Bell.
Thank you very much.
Not Bell, sorry.
Thank you very much.
It's time I stood down.
May I ask for a show of hands in the room?
So this is any against? Any abstentions? Okay, the proxy vote was 144 for, none against, and 2 abstentions, so the resolution's passed.
Right. May I ask for the presentation of the annual report?
It's my great pleasure to commend the annual report to you. We managed to get it out earlier this year than any previous year because in some ways it's a strange thing, the AGM. We're talking about the year that ended in March and yet we're all consumed with what's happening now in terms of the successes of the Trust. So that report, concentrating on impact, the impact that we're having rather than the things we're doing is very important and how we're meeting our charitable objectives. And I'd really like to thank the team that put it together, and there was quite a lot of input from trustees about how impact should work. So I hope that you enjoyed it, although I won't do a quiz about whether you remember it in full. Last year I commented on the turbulent times that we faced, and it's no different. We're still fighting hard to preserve and enhance legal protections for wildlife. The wildlife movement has played a vital role, and if you think about how much people were able to raise the profile of environment during the past election campaign, we shouldn't stop now. We need to keep going. And a lot of you, I know, a lot of our members wrote to their MPs or their prospective MPs and asked them what were their views on wildlife and nature protection. And I think we should continue with that, especially since one wildlife member of staff is now a member of Parliament. So well done, Charlotte Kane. So keep badgering your MPs, and I'm really glad to hear that the Youth Forum is doing that as well. So you could say it's a bit of a gloomy outlook still, but I think there's a lot that we can be very proud of achieving. When I started as chair 4 years ago, there was still a lot going on in terms of Speechley's Farm and the very start of Strawberry Hill. And the team has worked enormously hard in order to get us to the point where we can start doing things. So it's great that we can now start talking about where we're going to put the car park and those sort of things for Strawberry Hill, and also about the future that it'll bring. So thank you to Brian and the whole of the Wildlife Trust team for making sure that we make best use of our resources and continue to meet our charitable objectives. It's not just staff, it's volunteers, and we've got a large number of volunteers who are extremely diligent and dedicated, and we'll hear some being rewarded later in the meeting. And so my thanks to all of them as well. Without you, we couldn't achieve nearly as much. And to our members, keep being members, please. And if you stop being members, make sure that you've written us in your wills. So it was fantastic seeing that if you went onto the Wildlife Trust website and seeing that it counting up. And recently there have been a lot of people who have been in Cumbria
who see the Cumbrian appeal have then come onto our website and donated money as well. So that is very close to £500,000 raised. Is fantastic. Okay, so that's all I want to say. I commend the annual report to you and will now ask you to vote on approving it.
Well, the resolution 3 to approve the annual report of the Board of Trustees. This is proposed by Council. So there's been a proposal. May I have a seconder?
Can you?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And ask for a show of hands in the room.
In favour?
In favour? Well, that looks a huge majority. Against? None, I think. Abstention? Again, I think none.
Okay, and the proxy vote is 144 for and 144 and 6 abstentions.
Well, thank you very much. A presentation and adoption of the accounts and the auditor's report. Sorry. Oh, yes.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, it's very nice to see you all. My name's Hannah Bartram. I'm the Honorary Treasurer of the Trust. My commentary today refers to the annual accounts for the financial year 23-24, as William's just said. Now, it's hard to compete against Power of the Youth and Power of Brian, but the power of money, of course, is really critical to everything that we're doing. So I've already put down the clicker. So this is the financial overview for last financial year, and as you can see, the total income was just shy of £7 million. 2/3 of that income comes from grants, partnerships and business activities. So we had over 30 different funders support the Trust, which is fantastic. In terms of partnerships, that's where we did things like we sold our conservation expertise. And business activities are where we are running events and selling merchandise. The other third of our income comes from donations, legacies and memberships, and those, I have to say, remain a really critical element of our income generation. And we are, of course, hugely grateful to all those individuals and organisations that contributed, not just financially, of course, but in terms of strengthening our voice when we're advocating and campaigning for wildlife. In terms of expenditure, the majority of our income is spent on maintaining and improving nature reserves and working with others outside of our nature reserves to improve that land for wildlife. So what does that mean? So, for example, includes laying the groundwork for adjustments to water levels at Speeches Farm. We've already heard a lot about Strawberry Hill, but working to understand the best management of Strawberry Hill for nightingales and other warblers. Whilst, of course, we are out there giving advice to, well, in this case, last year at least, over 100 land managers. We invest heavily in fundraising and income generation and in education and community outreach. And last year, we reached more than 9,500 people of all ages through staff-led face-to-face events and activities, which is fantastic. So there's a couple of notable financial events I just wanted to bring your attention to that have happened this financial year. The first of those actually relates to Trumpington Meadows, which after years of negotiation, and it really is years of negotiation and hard work by the team at the Trust, the monies committed for the long-term management of that site were finally paid. And as you can see, 4.65 million, which is no small amount of money, but it is for a very long time period of 50 years, I think it is, 50 years management. And secondly, Brian's already alluded to this, we are successful in hang on a second, I haven't done toward. Secondly, we were successful in securing just under £1 million from BIFA and the hugely ambitious campaign to raise funds for Strawberry Hill, which, as you have heard today, has raised £1.5 million, which is simply extraordinary. And if you did donate, thank you very much for doing so. And as Brian's also said, we are in the process of selling the buildings and the farmhouse, which will generate an income of about £1 million. So, as you can imagine, The Trust faced a number of significant financial challenges during the year, many of which are ongoing, and that included rising costs for materials, tools, contractors, salaries, with subscription income from memberships not increasing at the same rate. So members will recall that we continue to hold membership fees at the rate of the 2017-18 rate in recognition of the squeeze on disposable income. And trustees, my fellow trustees and I, also recognise that in order to retain skilled staff, the Trust must pay the market rate for the skills it requires. And not surprisingly, competition for grants remains extremely high. There are opportunities too, and they are very important. So, as you will know, we now own a 50% share of Muchwood Green Burials, which is already generating a return of 7% on our investment, which is great. And we're continuing to look for suitable sites across all 3 counties. Species Farm is now registered for carbon credits, which we can very soon start to sell. And by enhancing our wildlife sites, we're also generating what are called biodiversity net gain units, and I will point you to the conservation staff to explain what they mean, but we will also start selling those to developers, and which will generate an income. And we're constantly looking at ways to improve our digital marketing and new ways of support, alongside keeping a very strong control over our costs. So looking forward, there's so much important work still happening. So trustees approved another investment budget for 24-25 and are aiming to move to a balanced budget within 2 to 3 years. And the generous legacies which we have received in recent years have allowed us to continue our vital work of nature reserve management, survey monitoring, education and outreach, whilst also investing in that long-term transformative conservation work that we're doing at places like the Great Fen and Strawberry Hill. So I just wanted to end by thanking you all for your ongoing support, and I hope you're proud of what your Wildlife Trust is achieving. Thank you.
So we move to Resolution 4, to approve the annual accounts and auditors' report. This has been proposed by Council. May I have a seconder? Thank you very much. So may I ask for a show of hands in favor? That looks pretty much a majority. Any against?
Okay, so the proxy vote for the annual accounts report, 141 for, 1 against, and 4 abstained. So the motion is passed or approved.
Great, thank you. Appointments of the auditors. Price Bailey are proposed by Council as auditors. The previous years was conducted by Safri Champness, after which the audit was put out to tender, and Price Bailey were selected. I'm going to ask Hannah to speak to it.
Yes, very briefly. So, as Partha said, in the last few months, we conducted a tendering process for the financial audit of the Trust. We had 4 audit firms respond, and we interviewed 3 of those firms that best suited our requirements. And after careful consideration, the trustees proposed to members today that Price Bailey are appointed as the auditors. They are a top 30 accountancy and business advisory firm based in the region, and they have a large specialist team that concentrates on the charity sector. So they're very well suited for the needs of the Trust. Thank you.
Is this working? Yeah, it is. Sorry. So to approve the appointment of Price Bailey as auditors, that's Resolution 5. This is proposed by Council. May I have a seconder? Thank you very much. May I have the show of hands in favor of the motion? That looks any against? Or abstention? Oh, thank you very much.
So the proxy vote It is 139 for, 4 against, and 3 abstentions. So the resolution is approved.
Thank you very much. Now we move to elections. For those candidates here with us today, I'll ask each to stand up as I introduce them. First of all, re-election of council member. Matt Hayes is standing for re-election, having served his first term. As you know, Matt works as a research assistant at the University Museum of Zoology in Cambridge, and since 2022 has been studying for his PhD working on trust reserves, investigating how we can maintain suitable microclimates for butterflies and other species. Matt is a member of WTBCN, Cambridge Local Group Committee, and works closely with the Young People's Forum. So Resolution 6, to approve the election to council of Matt Hayes, who is present. Can you? Proposed by council. Ask for it. May I have a seconder? Thank you. Well, there are more than one. And show of hands in the room in favor. That looks. Any against? Any? You may sit down. Thank you. Any against? Abstention? Well, I think that's.
Okay, so 141 for, 2 against, and 3 abstentions.
So I think that's carried, approved. Welcome. Formal election of co-opted trustee. We have one person standing for formal election as trustee, having been co-opted since the last AGM. His biography has been on the website for the past month, and that's James Marsh. James is a solicitor and has been a committee member of Cambridge Law Society, and is also a trustee and board member of Cambridge Science Centre. Outside of work, James enjoys music, photography, heritage, nature, and conservation as a member of Wildlife Trust BCN, RSPB, National Trust, and Cambridge PPF. That's marvelous. Resolution 7, to approve the election to council of James Marsh, who is present. Could you... there you are, sir. Sorry, I should have spotted you before. Out of sight. Proposed by council. May I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Thank you. And show of hands in the room in favor. Any against? Any abstentions? Well, that... And proxy?
So, the proxy votes 135 for, 3 against, and 8 abstentions.
So I think that's welcome. That's great, approved. Now, council members standing down, Professor William Stevens. Why?
There are rules.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah? There are rules, which means I have to stand down, so there we are.
Well, we've served for 10 years as trustee and 4 years as chair. Thank you very much indeed. Paul Solon, is that the right pronunciation? So, standing down, having served his term after 10 years as a trustee and 6 years as honorary secretary. Rebecca Stock is standing down, having served her term after 6 years as a trustee, but is unable to join us today. And Rebecca Jarrett stood down in September after 7 years as a trustee and 2 years as vice chair, and she's present. Rebecca? Thank you, thank you. Kat Hagman was co-opted as a trustee and stood down in September. I'd like to record our thanks on behalf of council and staff to the 5 trustees. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry I will not have a chance to work with you. Full biographies for the proposed chair, vice chair, honorary secretary, honorary treasurer, and chair of conservation, education, and community committee are on the website. Election of chair. Council proposes the election of Dr. Hilary Allison. Hilary, thank you. Yes, of course. Hilary has spent most of her career advocating for protection, restoration, management, and expansion of woodlands, including 25 years at the Woodland Trust, and most recently as a forestry commissioner. She has been a trustee since 2021. Resolution 8, to approve the election of Hilary Allison as chair, and that's proposed by council. May I have a seconder? Well, thank you very much. And for a show of hands, for approval, that looks airtight. Any objections? Okay,
144, 1 against and 5 abstentions.
terrific. Look forward to working with you. Election of Vice Chair. Council proposed the election of Michael Krause. Michael has worked in nature conservation charities, including Fauna and Flora International, Plant Life, the RSPB, and the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust for over 20 years in roles including fundraising and senior management. He has been a trustee since 2023. Resolution 9, to approve the election of Michael Krause as Vice Chair, and is proposed by Council. May I have a seconder?
Graham Fry.
Thank you. Show of hands in favor of? Thank you very much. Any against?
Okay,
Thank you.
142 for, 1 against and 3 abstentions. Approved.
Marvelous. Thank you. Election of Honorary Secretary. Council proposes the re-election of Jan Davis as Honorary Secretary. Jan? Jan is an experienced human resources leader specializing in developing managers in complex global environments. Since taking early retirement, she has focused on volunteering and is also chair of trustees of the Hunts Community Cancer Network. She has been a trustee of this trust since 2020. To approve the election of Jan Davis as Honorary Secretary, that's Resolution 10, proposed by Council. May I have the seconder? Thank you very much. Show of hands in the room. That looks pretty decisive. Any against? Objection? Abstention? Proxy?
Proxy 144, 1 against and 5 abstentions.
Lovely. Thank you. Welcome. Election of Honorary Treasurer. Council proposed the re-election of Hannah Bertram. Hannah spent her professional career in the public policy and environment sectors. Hannah became a trustee in 2019 and was elected treasurer in 2022. So Resolution 11, to approve the re-election of Hannah Bertram as honorary treasurer. Proposed by Council. May I have a seconder? You got that? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Show of hands in the room. Any objection? Okay, proxy?
Proxy vote 139 for, 1 against and 6 abstentions.
Right. Thank you. Well, welcome again. Election of Chair of Conservation, Education and Community Committee. Council proposes the election of Professor Sam Brockington. Is Sam here? No, he's not here. Okay. Sam is Professor of Evolution in the Department of Plant Science at the University of Cambridge and curator of the Cambridge University Botanic Garden. Sam has been a trustee since 2017 and chair of the Conservation, Education and Community Committee since 2023. So Resolution 12, that's to approve the election of Professor Sam Brockington as chair of the Conservation, Education and Community Committee, proposed by Council. May I have a second? Right. That's Akram, Professor Akram. Show of hands in the room. That looks okay. Any objection? Okay. Proxy?
Proxy 142 votes for, 1 against and 3 abstain. Approved.
Great. Resolution to ratify Council decision to increase to fees for new members with no change for existing members. Do bear that in mind.
You can always voluntarily increase it.
I resign and now we want to enter again. That's the idea. Okay, I'll remember that. Subscriptions were last increased in 2017-18, since when requests for voluntary increases have been made each year to our current members. Council has approved a proposal for newly joining individual and joint members to increase by 50p per month. So annual subscriptions would increase from £42 to £48 for individuals and £48 to £54 joint. All right? Resolution 13, to ratify Council's decision to increase the fees for new members with no change for existing members. But that's proposed by Council. Ask for a seconder. Okay. And show of hands in the room in favor of the motion. Okay. Any against? Abstention? One abstention.
And the proxy vote 123 for, 22 against, and 1 abstained.
Thank you. And now we come to announcement of awards, which is a very nice occasion. Several will be wanting to give a speech. The Trust relies on the dedicated support of a vast range of volunteers, including many of you in our audience today. Our awards honor volunteers whose contributions have been particularly outstanding. The awards take the form of £75 worth of books. One of the winners cannot be with us today, but I can at least tell you a little bit about them. So let me do that. Agenda Huxley Award. The Agenda Huxley Award recognizes an outstanding contribution to any aspect of the work of the Trust. This year we have awarded the 3 volunteers, Barbara Cracknell and Sean David Johnston. Barbara Cracknell has been a Wildlife Watch volunteer for over 10 years and assists with other events for young people. For several years, she has also helped our communication team by keeping our press coverage spreadsheets and folders and managing our image library and online events listings. Unfortunately, Barbara is unable to be here with us today. Sean and David Johnston are both incredibly hardworking, loyal, and reliable volunteers on reserves work parties in Bedfordshire, often volunteering 3 days a week across the county, most recently at Strawberry Hill. They've even helped with lambing in the past. It's wonderful. Sean and David, please come forward. The Oliver...
Did he want to say some words?
Sorry?
Did they want to say a few words?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Of course. It goes to show, even as experienced as I am and old as I am, I get nervous. Please.
I just wanted to say that much as this is appreciated, the main reason we volunteer so often is because we enjoy doing it and we feel that we're making a contribution to the work of the Nature Reserve Conservation Team. And also I'd like to point out that we are part of an army of volunteers who are equally dedicated and who go out also several days a week, and also some people take part in monitoring activities and other activities related to the Wildlife Trust's conservation work. So thank you very much for this, but we feel that we're just representative of many other people as well. Thank you.
To the Oliver Rackham Award, which recognizes an individual who has demonstrated outstanding service to wildlife in our area through conservation monitoring or research. This year, the trustees have decided to make 2 awards. to Charles Turner and to John Willett. Charles Turner. Charles has been a reserve warden and an active botanical recorder in Cambridgeshire for over 50 years. My gosh, that's incredible. Most notably at Gamlinge. How do you pronounce this things? And Gamlinge Meadow. A major contributor to the county flora, his first records date back to 1958. He's a distinguished academic botanist and quaternary geologist, having taught at Cambridge University and Open University. Charles has also supported and nurtured many other beginning botanists throughout his long career. Charles? Okay. I'll come to you.
Hello. I want to say a few words about Oliver.
Do you want to sit down?
No, I'm going to come up here. Well, I'd like to thank the trustees for the honour that they've given me in giving me this award. But I'd also like to take the opportunity now to say a few words about Oliver Rackham, in whose memory this award is made. Oliver was a truly remarkable man. He came up to Corpus Christi College on a scholarship in 1958. He was due to read chemistry and physics, and he thought, but he had to do an extra half subject, and he chose botany. He did so well that nobody in the first year exam, nobody had seen any papers like it before, and so they persuaded him to take a full year, to take the extra year and make it up to full subject. And of course, he then did a PhD not on ecology or anything like that, but on the effect of light on plants. And after his PhD, Professor Sir Harry Godwin made him a demonstrator, and indeed he was probably at that time the world's greatest authority on the effect of light on plants, and he, together with his supervisor, organized a big international conference on that. Well, everything looked fine, but after Sir Harry retired, Professor Brown came along from Glasgow, and he didn't really understand Oliver, and he wanted that post, or the post, normally a demonstratorship would lead to a lectureship, but he wanted that for one of his colleagues from Glasgow. So Oliver, the great crisis, Oliver was suddenly left up in the air, as it were. He was supported by his college, Corpus Christi College, who realized what a brilliant man he was, and people looked around what he could do, and then, at that time, the Nature Conservancy wanted somebody to write a gazetteer and a synthesis of the ancient woodlands in East Anglia. And Oliver was asked whether he would do this, and he had a room in the Department of Agriculture. Well, that was just the start of things, as you can imagine. He was already a polymath. When he was an undergraduate, he was reading the classics in the original, just as for something that Cambridge undergraduates hadn't done for 150 years. And anyway, he produced such a fantastic report that everything then followed on from that. All those books, the Trees and Landscapes, the History of British countryside, and his major work really on ancient woodland. Now he also of course worked in Greece and particularly in Crete and in America. But I want to just give you just one or two extra things outside that. He was a very devoted fellow of Corpus Christi College. And he became the senior fellow, and indeed, when there was any arguments in college, at a college meeting, and the fellows were debating things, he would keep silent. And right at the end, people would say, now, Professor Rackham, because when Richard West became Professor of Botany, he righted that old wrong and appointed Oliver, gave him a personal chair. Professor Rackham, what do you think? And he would spell it out, and immediately it was clear that what should be done. Now, Corpus Christi had a problem. They appointed a new master, but they didn't get on with him. And eventually they decided within the year that they would have to ask him to resign, which he did. They then appointed a new master. And this time, within a few months, he announced that he was resigning. He didn't feel that this was his job. So for a Cambridge college to lose 2 masters within a very short period of time was a real disaster. And they turned round to Oliver and said, Oliver, do you think you could act as master for a year or so until we sorted it out? And I knew Oliver very well because we were direct contemporaries, and I was privileged to be invited to have dinner with him in the Master's Lodge. Now, masters always have their portraits painted. And the last thing I want to say is go into, if you're in Cambridge, go into the hall in Corpus Christi College. There you will see the portrait on the wall amongst all the other masters of Oliver. But instead of it being a sort of florid academic sitting in a desk with tomes of all sorts of things behind him and his academic clothes on, Oliver's painting is Oliver in his typical sort of fieldwork tweeds within Hayley Wood or whatever wood it is. It's a marvellous picture, and you should go and see that there.
By the way, well, your books are on the way.
Thank you very much. Yes.
But they're not quite here yet.
No, I want the new book on lichens. There's an illustrated book on lichens.
Well, that was probably hard to get hold of. Maybe that's why it's late, but it'll be there.
It's great.
Thank you very much. Where am I now?
So now I'm here.
Yes. John Wilcott. John has been the warden for Staunton's Pit since it became a reserve 25 years ago, helping manage and monitor the reserve ever since. He has been one of the most active and consistent birdringers across the Trust's reserves, always keen to share his skills and passion with others. He's hanging up his ringing gloves and standing down as warden this year. John Willett for the Oliver Rackham Award.
Can you hear me? I accept this on the behalf of all the volunteers that have helped at Staunton's Pits. I was bird ringing at Staunton's Pits in 1992, so I fell into the job as warden because I was already there. But over the years, I've seen much development, and if any of you have visited, it's near the Sixfields Stadium in the centre of Northampton, and a huge, great reed bed. And of course, some of the highlights of bringing there over the years is the number of birds that you catch. And to say that we had reed warblers coming back 10 years in a row, the same particular bird, is actually amazing. But even more amazing, is better than winning the lottery, is that we had a group of us used to go down to Portugal every year in September, and we caught one of our reed warblers that we had ringed in June, and in September it was on its way. People said I took it with EasyJet. But on behalf of all the other volunteers in Northamptonshire, which we worked for years and years, I thank everybody.
Come to the John Smith Award. The John Smith Award was constituted in 2017 in memory of our much loved and missed former Great Fen restoration officer, passionate conservationist, and recognizes volunteers who have gone the extra mile in their work for the Trust, having a significant impact on a particular aspect of the Trust's work. This year, the trustees decided to make 2 awards, one to Alex Watkinchild and the other to Frank York. Alex Watkinchild has been involved with the Wildlife Trust BCN since the start of the Young People's Forum in early 2022. Alongside contributing to almost all forum activities, he litter picks in his local area, contributes to wildlife communications in the Trust by sending photos for social media and articles for newsletters, and advocates for wildlife at his school. He also finds time to play football and volunteer for a local charity that supports elderly people to look after their pets. This is marvelous. Well, Alex, would you like to come forward? Really? Sorry, please say something.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alex. Well, I was really surprised about this, and I'm very grateful. Thank you. I enjoy the stuff I do to help the Wildlife Trust, and I care a lot about wildlife and wild spaces they live in. But I think another reason why I enjoy helping is because everyone I have met has made me feel so welcome, and have been so helpful to me. Alison and Laura always ask if I'm okay and if I need help. And well, I never know what I don't know, but that's just me. But they help me, and Matt and Becca and everyone helps me. Everyone I meet at the Wildlife Trust knows so much stuff. I went to an ecology workshop run by Brian. I do find a lot of things difficult, but Brian, like everyone, makes me feel comfortable. And Matt, the trustee, without him I would have been a lot more scared, and I definitely would have found things a lot more difficult. I want to thank everyone at the Wildlife Trust for this award. I also wanted to mention my Uncle Philip because he rescued Trevor the tarantula. Trevor lived for 7 years, and my uncle educates a lot of people about spiders because he learned so much from Trevor. I want to thank my Uncle Philip. I want to thank my mum too for helping me get organised, and my mum and dad for getting me to places I need to be. Thank you.
Very much. And finally, the other John Smith Award winner, Frank York. Frank volunteers at Summerlees almost every day. He has taken the responsibility for our bird feeder station, helping people with recent sightings or other questions, and often helps us out in the visitor center too. Frank?
I'll only say a few short words, but thank you to the Trust for this. I've only been volunteering a relatively short term in comparison to all the other award winners. But once again, thank you to everybody at the Trust, and especially thank you to Megan and Nicola at the kiosk at Summerlees for bearing up with me, and Lawrence and the team on the reserve. Thank you.
We're now at the final, any other business. I know that we have not had any questions in advance, so I'll ask you any questions from the room now. Yes, sir.
This is not so much a question as someone to be remembered before this AGM finishes. I know a fair number of you will remember George Cottam. He passed away very sadly and very suddenly in July of this year. George was inspirational in the Hunts local group. He chaired the local group on two occasions, 2 sets of years. He was also one of the wardens at Brampton Wood, and he was absolutely, completely sold on wildlife. I watched him develop as someone enthusiastic about wildlife, and his fundraising abilities were second to none. He manned the beer festival in St Ives and in St Neots, raising thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. He is absolutely dearly missed by the local group committee and all those who knew him. He was an amazing man. He was very self-effacing. He would do anything for anyone at any time. He was just an outstanding person and an outstanding volunteer, and we all miss him really dearly. Thank you.
Any other show of hands? Well, that pretty much brings our meeting to a close. Thank you very much for joining us, but I want to just give my appreciation to Michael for the help he has given me now, educating me into the workings of this trust since I was nominated. And it's been a great pleasure to have made his friendship. I knew him from the past by reputation, of course, but I never really got to know him until recently. So the guidance he has given me, I hope I've learned a bit. I'm not a very good student, but on the other hand, I'm trying hard. Thank you very much for all your help and for all the work you've done, and I hope I'll measure up. I think I'm handing over to Laurie to tell us about food.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Right. Okay, well, thanks for that, everyone. Some wonderful voting there, so brilliant work. So now it is time for lunch, but please, please, listen to these detailed instructions first. If you look at your badge, you will notice that you have a letter on your badge. You should have, unless you are staying here for activities in the afternoon. So the letter on your badge denotes which of the guided walks around Strawberry Hill you will be on. Groups A, B, C, and D, your coach will be leaving at 1:45 from, Oh, assemble it, well, sorry. Oh dear, oh dear. Right, yes, sorry. Your coach will be leaving at 2 o'clock, so could you therefore please assemble at 1:45 where the coaches will be waiting for you outside the entrance. Therefore, those groups, A, B, C, and D, if the rest of us could allow them to go and have their lunch first, that will help the logistics later on. The rest of you, your coach, if you could assemble for your coach at 2:30, we will get everyone back here no later than 4:30 p.m. The venue is going to close at 4:45, so you'll have a wonderfully big window to get sorted. We'll still be open for toilets and things like that when you return. But if you are going on the coaches, which I think is most of you, we'd be grateful if you could take your belongings with you after lunch, as we're going to be clearing everything away. We have to get out of here by 5. So that will make our job easier if you could take things with you on the coach. Those that are staying for the venue, the activities here in the venue, please, obviously, you can keep your belongings with you until you leave. Everyone, before you depart at the end of the day, if you could take your name badges and leave them in the boxes provided, that would be wonderful. Laurie, have I forgotten to say anything? In that case, could those first 4 groups please start an orderly stampede for the lunch? Enjoy the afternoon, everyone.